is a neutral intermediary while the negotiations go on the provision for the humanitarian corridors and other humanitarian issues. They are the intermediary between the warring parties in resolving humanitarian issues. Let me also tell you that we are a unified team. Today, Ukrainian Red Cross Society functions in all the territories of Ukraine, in all the oblasts of the Ukrainian territory. In the regions near the border, they receive people, receive loads, help the local authorities to resettle people, help them. The loads are being sorted out and sent and delivered to the areas where this help is needed. Today, the Ukrainian International and Ukrainian Red Society works in two locations. One location is Kiev-based. Everyone knows where in Kiev we are located. The other point is in the city of Vinnytsia. Since we faced a threat of internet disruptions, that's why we relocated our office to Vinnytsia, because we can't work without a sustainable internet connection. I will give the floor to my colleagues, but before I do that, as of to the 23rd of March, we have accumulated more than 167 million hryvnias worth of aid. We will provide a detailed report. We will publish that on our website. I will give the floor to my colleague Pavlo, and he will highlight the issues he thinks and deems important. I will follow on what the previous speaker has been talking about. Let me focus your attention on the following. Indeed, the Ukrainian Red Cross Society is an independent, non-governmental organization that provides all the necessary help to the population who are under the stress of war, irrespective of the regions. Indeed, we are not a government-run organization. We don't receive money from the budget, state budget. We are functioning only thanks to the contributions and charity contributions coming from ordinary people from around the world, including international bodies such as International Committee of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, and International Red Cross, the Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent in other countries. We do appreciate this aid. This aid is transformed into specific projects run by our society. We are working in all the areas of Ukraine. We have more than 200 local organizations. We unite this work, and with the help of more than 2,000 volunteers in Ukraine, if we take into account the exacerbation of the war situation compared to what has happened on the 24th of February, the society was preparing for this and had been preparing for such a development. Shall I say the following? Indeed, everyone was caught napping. However, we were getting prepared. We were serious about the information that we received before the invasion. And we began our work in such extraordinary circumstances about a month or 45 days before the invasion. Our structures were ready. We decentralized our work and our warehouses. All our rapid response units were mobilized. And since the very first seconds of the invasion, our territorial units got down to work. In the west of Ukraine, we were present at all the cross-checks, border crossing points, and we were providing colossal help, social work, humanitarian aid, psychological rehabilitation. For those people leaving Ukraine, you witnessed how tens of thousands of cars were accumulating at the border, and there we had our people working. In the western part of the country, or in the central part, we have begun work through four powerful humanitarian hubs, warehouses where humanitarian aid was accumulated and then distributed to other territories in Ukraine. And my colleague has mentioned that through our structures of the Ukrainian Red Cross Society, we have redistributed more than 3,000 tons of humanitarian aid. And today, Ukrainian Red Cross Society is the biggest public organization providing, non-governmental organization providing the humanitarian aid to the civilian population. In the central Ukraine, we focus on projects that my colleagues will highlight, the personnel training, how to provide first response in cities like Kiev and Kharkiv that were constantly pummeled by the Russian forces. We had our rapid response units. The information is available, the information on how the peaceful cities were bombarded. And the first people to come were people from the state emergency service, plus our people from our rapid response units. Another mission of this organization is evacuating people from the hotspots and conflict zones. My colleague Taras will talk on that. I will say a few words on the humanitarian aid. I mentioned 3,000 tons of aid, but there are a lot of issues that have to do with the question of how to receive humanitarian aid from the Ukrainian Red Cross. Here we are working along a number of avenues. One is a centralized provision of aid as the response to the request from the local governments. Either regional authorities or territorial authorities or city mayors are coming up with the requests, what their needs are, what are the most needed items for a particular community. On the basis of such requests, the Ukrainian Red Cross Society forms a load which is going to some cities, villages, and resettlements to be redistributed by the local authorities. Second point is when you turn to the Ukrainian Red Cross Society representatives in your locality, and now, and especially now, when the Ukrainian cities are being liberated, we go to these, in the first place, villages. Villages is our primary point of focus, where we deliver humanitarian aid to the dwellers and the local communities. These are the areas where we work in terms of the humanitarian aid. The specifics of the Ukrainian Red Cross in the hotspots and the rapid response units will be highlighted by our colleague Logginov. Welcome to our listeners and watchers. The rapid response unit is the most efficient and advanced part of our overall activities. We have 21 units with 66 volunteers. The numbers are not very much exact because people are coming and going, so this is the ballpark figure. The units are the last people to leave or sometimes not able to leave from the occupied territories. We are now having volunteers of the Red Cross working in Mariupol. We have people working in the occupied Kherson region. We have rapid response units in Lysychansk who are working under the shellings including the Mykola, Chernigiv regions, where the work is very dangerous, but it must be done. What do? We are helping people who have been living in most exacting circumstances. Either we find them bombshells or the help that we provide to the basements, fresh water, foodstuffs, generators, fuels for the generators in different locations. We want to find out what the most wanted and needed things are. We also help with clearing up rubbles when the rockets strike buildings, together with the first responders of this emergency service. Our people come to provide psychological aid, mental health, helping those who are disabled, old people, children, and so on. We also provide convoys for the columns of the buses that are taking away people from the occupied territories. The presence of our cars and mobile means with the Red Cross sign on it provides some kind of help to secure peaceful passage. This is one of the ways to somehow provide protection to them. More than once, we were shot at through the firearms. We were under the fire from the mine launchers, but thank goodness our volunteers have all survived. We have helped to evacuate more than 60,000 persons. This is only when we talk about the Kiev region. Let me emphasize that we are not dealing with the individual requests. Why? Because we don't have such resources. But the second answer is that we are working with the local authorities, the state emergency service, and other bodies empowered by the government to secure such passages. But on our own, we cannot organize safe passage or convoys. Our work has also been fruitful at different railway stations that were flooded with the people. In Shagine, for example, we have a field kitchen that will provide food for 500 people per day. At this point in time, we don't have such big numbers of people, so the workload has decreased. Those settlements, villages that have been liberated, we come there, we monitoring the situation, we deliver food, bread, hygiene items, we bring in medical specialists and doctors. So we are the first to come to the liberated places. In addition, we evacuate people that need to be taken to hospital facilities. So when we go to the place, we give away and deliver humanitarian aid and taking back people that are in need of hospital treatment. As for the first aid, I think my colleague Nadiya will talk on that, but I would like to touch upon the psychological and medical and mental aid to the population, plus anti-mining security. Anti-mining security is an important issue. You know, we are traveling and we see unexploded devices, mines. We know that Russians have mined the bodies of the dead, so we should be very careful, as must be the people living there. We are providing trainings on anti-mining security that will save lives. This is one point. The second point is that emotional support of the people in the time of war. Even if a person hasn't suffered physically, that person is likely to suffer emotionally, psychologically. One woman wrote to me, why is it that you are highlighting that you distributed 18,000 cups of tea? It's not cups of tea per se. It means 1,800 of emotional support sessions. It means talking to people who have miraculously survived, people who want to share their experience and verbalize it. So we provide that kind of help. Dear colleagues, Taras Logginov is a very reticent person. He didn't tell you that when we have tens of thousands of people in Kiev metro, he and his unit distributed 7,600 packets of food, and that was done during one night. And also, he didn't mention the fact that were taking place, they were able to get out people from the hostomel on scratchers, disabled persons. And his modesty doesn't allow him to say everything about his hard work that they have done. Hundreds of people at the railway stations were met with his teams. They were fed and they were helped in their going abroad. So the rapid response unit, perhaps the most evident response, but there are other kinds of work that we provide, something that seems to be not that visible, but it is important in the witnessed by the fact how number of casualties has been decreased. And my colleagues, Nadiya, will tell you about that. The first aid provision training is something we are statutorily obliged to do. The information that we shared with the population, with the different organizations, how to help people before the specialists arrived. We were doing very extensive work over the last 2 months, more extensive than we used to do. Since the 24th of February, our trainings continued, and of course, we were made to adjust to the issues of first aid. Let me also tell you that we are providing first aid training in bomb shells, in different buildings, sometimes even in the places very bizarre and strange, such as corridors or bathrooms. But over the last 4 weeks, we have provided training to more than 50,000 people in different locations of Ukraine. In Kiev, we have been working with the State Emergency Service, and we engaged volunteers last week, people willing to help us. They were trained, and after the training, they received the first aid kit with all the materials needed, such as bandages, for them to be able to provide first aid. Our plans are to continue with our networks and educating and training programs, also providing the first aid kits to the local communities. We have been able to do so with the help of our partners, donors, the Regional Red Cross and International Committee of the Red Cross. Currently, at the Department of the First Aid, we have personnel of 10 professionals plus trainers and volunteers they provide such trainings to a lot of people. Taking advantage of this opportunity, I would like to talk about other kinds of aid that the Red Cross has been implementing. This is what we call voucher aid to the internally displaced persons. This is one of the most critical points where we can provide vouchers to the families for them to identify on their own the needs of their families. In such big cities as Dnipro, Kropivnitsky, Poltava, Cherkasy, and others, we have distributed more than 50,000 vouchers for people to purchase foodstuffs and hygiene items on their own discretion. We have also launched this program with the Silpo network, where people can get vouchers from the Red Cross worth 2,200 hryvnias. Very shortly, we will launch such a program in this capital city of Kiev for the people who have been evacuated to the Kiev city or Kiev region with the relevant registration marks in their documents. People who have lost their dwellings in Kiev. And here we are talking about a family that consists of one person, three vouchers, 500 worth each. If the family consists of three persons and more, that worth will grow radically. It will ensure that the family prioritize their purchases. We also prioritize our activities with the displaced persons from the hotspots, disabled persons, with the family that raise children under 12 years of old, disabled persons from the childhood, and we have been helped here by the German Red Cross. They have helped us to buy 20,000 units of these vouchers. Dear Ukrainians, I think that the words of my colleagues and the latest that by my colleague Nadiya, it gives you a message that you should join the Ukrainian Red Cross to help other people. What Nadiya has been talking about, the voucher aid, we have followed up our work that we began before the war. We did this in the eastern part of the country. The other issue that we dealt with on a large scale before the war, and this means mobile units. And I will invite my colleague to join us here at the podium, and my colleague will highlight the details. Listen to this and take advantage of what he has to say. It will be especially useful in the process of the recovery of the Ukrainian medicine system after the war. The mobile brigades of the Red Cross were very active on different occasions, crisis situation before the war, but such a sustainable level was reached in 2015, where there was a high need for mobile brigades in the eastern part of the world of Ukraine, where many people were left to live within the restricted access to medical services. Over these years, the mobile brigades have developed their quality. As of now, they have grown into a full-scale and efficient tool of response to the emergency situations. Over the last years, we have registered more than 100,000 cases of rendering first aid by the nurses who are part of the mobile brigades. These mobile units are exclusive temporary response to the crisis situations. And I would like to reiterate, they always act in line with the professionals, first responders. That is to say, Red Cross does not work instead of, but rather buttresses and empowers the available capacities. Practically saying, it provides for the all-round help to the general doctors, family doctors in the remote locations where there are restrictions to medical facilities or the locations near to the front line. As always, we are synchronizing the work of our mobile brigades and are bringing them in line with the government bodies. We are partners in such situations. The events that we are witnessing now in Ukraine have made us develop our sites in different locations. Many local communities and cities have been struck by the war. Now we are deploying our units in the Kiev region. We are setting up temporarily first aid help units where people can get help with the help of the fast diagnosis. What matters here is that people are receiving the necessary medicines to stabilize his or her condition. We are doing what we can. We are doing our best to set up such a system, such a service that will empower and make more robust the service of the first aid medical help through our mobility, through our logistical resources in different regions, and also with the help of our reliable donors, including Austrian Red Cross and other organizations of the Red Cross throughout the world. Thank you. Mr. Alexander didn't mention that mobile medical brigades are now deployed in practically all Ukrainian regions, including the front line. The front line means the territory of the whole Ukraine. And I would like to say sorry to my friend Alexander. I seem to have taken over the moderator's functions. Perhaps the journalists who have joined us through Zoom, perhaps they have questions to us. People have been hooked up through the Zoom and they can put questions. Do we have such a possibility for them to ask questions? Humanitarian situation. The worst situation here is in Donetsk and Luhansk regions. In Khersonsk, we see the exacerbation of the situation. It is difficult to provide humanitarian aid there. Mariupol, you will know that about 2 weeks ago, when people left the place, those volunteers that we had contact with, but in Mariupol, there are volunteers. Unfortunately, we don't have a direct connection with them. Oh, we do, will you? I don't think we should be outright and outspoken about people that we have contacts with in Mariupol, with our volunteers, including the hot places like Kherson. I don't think we should divulge such information. So we do have connection with them. Of course, Kiev region has suffered a lot, but relatively speaking, I think we will come on top of situation helped by the international community and by our local units. If I may, I will put a question or two. Would you go into more detail? How do you organize your work? You mentioned 10,000 volunteers. How many people work for the Red Cross? I understand you have staff and you have volunteers. How do you become a volunteer of the Red Cross? You have a person coming from the street, I want to help. Perhaps you need some training. Perhaps you have to go sit an exam. What are the procedures of becoming a Red Cross volunteer for the people to know? Is it that when people see in the red outfits, the most best person to say on that is Nadiya. Let me tell you a few words on the staff. We have a national committee, and they have staff, people who are helping to develop local organizations. Local bodies are based in big cities, in oblast centers, and they also have regional centers. Over the last year, the number of them decreased, but so far, with the help of the local authorities and oblast authorities and National Red Cross, in many cities, we have renewed the functions of our units. And these units, our local representations, are working with the local dwellers, local community, local mayors. When we talk about the rayon, which means a district unit, it would account for 2 or 3 staff. In the biggest cities, we have from 5 to 20 persons, depending on the size of the local organization. Of course, volunteers bear the brunt of the working with the population, and they perform a lot of functions. How do you become a volunteer? Well, the first prerequisite is your will. If a person is willing to help, they will find an organization where to make their dreams true. Now, our website has been attacked on a couple of times, but there is an information where you can find everything you need in terms of how to join our Red Cross teams and movements. After you have registered, the volunteer department will contact you and invite you for the volunteer training course, where you will be informed of what the organization is, the principle of volunteer work, the code of conduct, and other red tape mechanisms that will allow persons to understand that this is a volunteer charity organization, but we have our own rigid principles of activities, and of course, it goes beyond Ukraine to other countries of the world. After a person has passed through these points, and he or she then is able to choose a direction where they want to work. Either it's a mobile brigade or rapid response, international humanitarian law department. If you have enough time, you can combine different areas of work. This is what our volunteers do. The heads of the departments and oblast organizations are supporting and promoting volunteer movement to help the Ukrainian Red Cross. So this is where you balance your abilities and your capabilities. Let me also add here that volunteers are officially registered. We know them. We are responsible for their lives. We are responsible for their health. And it is a right to wear the Red Cross outfit once you are registered as a Red Cross volunteer. There is other thing to say. We have headquarters that is working at the National Committee. This headquarters is financed at the level of 60% by the International Committee of the Red Cross. For many years, we have been trying to get the Ukrainian authorities to ensure that we are budgeted from the state purse at the region or level, oblast level. We have not succeeded so far. We are financing our needs through the charities of businesses, of those who are helping us. We are visiting practically all Ukrainian oblasts, meeting the local authorities or the leaders of the amalgamated territorial communities, persuading them on how important Red Cross structures are. We are not asking much. What we are asking is the minimum pay. It will amount to 60 million per year, and we are receiving from the money that we receive. That money is taxed at the level of 100 million hryvnias a year. Another thing is that people are now witnessing to the work of the Red Cross. Our work has been noted at the highest level, the level of the United Nations organization. I hope that at some point the Ukrainian Red Cross movement will be equal to other countries. For example, in Austria, there's 30% of the population are co-working with the Red Cross as volunteers. 30% work with the emergency response, such as floods or fires, and 30% deem it their duty to work through the Red Cross in terms of raising awareness of the Austrian culture. I hope that after the victory, and I believe in it, although the Red Cross organization is a neutral, politically neutral organization, but as a Ukrainian citizen, I am sure in our victory, and I believe that this will be the principle that Ukrainian Red Cross will be based on, a structure that has shown its efficiency. The number of volunteers, 10,000, is that the number that predates the war, or you have seen the increase after the war began? We had around 10,000 volunteers in all the Ukrainian territories. Since the 24th of February, the number of volunteers has increased. Some of them, what we call a non-system volunteers. Others go through all the procedures that are required. How do you distinguish us? It's not about the uniform. It's about the certificate. It has a unique number, has a hologram, and we can identify them through our database, because we have our also some kinds of insurances. Our people must be enjoying these possibilities of insurance. We also provide some letters that is authorized by the general director or the director, empowering and giving powers people to render services through the Red Cross. For example, we had some businesses that wanted to help and provide humanitarian aid to the Chernihiv region under the war conditions. We provided them with the letters of support, and they were able to go to the places they wanted to. We also received people from the Transcarpathian region, young persons, socially aware, they have their own business, and they have loaded their trucks, and with our supporting letters from the Transcarpathian Red Cross, they went to the regions from where they received the requests. So the volunteer Red Cross movement works on the condition of the developing circumstances and on the basis of how the patriotic movement in Ukraine expands. Apart from being a president of the Ukrainian Red Cross, I had been a politician for a long time. I would like to take this podium to say, today we have seen a birth of the Ukrainian political nation, irrespective of the language you speak or your ethnic background. We are all Ukrainians, and we are all taking pride in the fact that we have that line in our passport saying nationality, Ukraine. This is an extraordinary event that has shown the unity of the Ukrainian people in defending their country as well as in providing humanitarian aid. Now, another question. I understand there is volunteer wing, and then a rapid response is something more cool. This is special forces, if I may. How do you get people trained for the rapid response units? How do you coordinate your activities with the local authorities, military administrations? You see, you are not internationally mandated. So how do you cooperate with the Ukrainian authorities? This cooperation is very fruitful. You see, when one body is efficient, then you are contacted by other bodies. When the state service for emergency situation have seen how good we are, they turn to us, they are updating us on the developments, and our cooperation has become more closer. As for the what you called special force, this is where we talk about the Red Cross volunteers, but of different, shall I say, area of focus. Perhaps these are people who are more, shall I say, hell-bent, more brave, more disciplined. You see, when we are in the harm's way, this is where our training and discipline matters. We want to be able not to lose our lives, because you need to be alive to provide help to others. So from my vantage point, I think these are better volunteers in the rapid response than others. You see, we have people here who are so modest. He is not saying that they are regularly training throughout the world in all seasons. And of course, we have been financed, in this case, by the Austrian Red Cross. And I am a doctor with many years of experience. I'm a neuro specialist. When I saw, I'm a surgeon, when I saw the way they provide help under the rubbles of the buildings, under the shellings, under the fire, I was amazed of how efficient they have been in providing first aid. I think many doctors would envy their professionals. Indeed, these people are hell-bent, people that are ready to go into the harm's way. They are very, very brave. And this war has shown their efficiency and their ability to work under the war conditions. Medical brigades, I think one of our colleagues mentioned that. You see, sometimes people fail the opportunity to turn to the mobile brigades of the Red Cross. People are turning to the medical facility they know about. How can you cooperate with these people? Can they make a call to the Red Cross mobile unit? Perhaps people will take advantage of this. Directly, you cannot make a call to the Brigade of the Red Cross. We are guided in our work through the Center for First Aid Response. And this center, the government-run response center, they distribute the forces. For example, you have a remote village where the roads are in bad conditions, you can move comfortably, and you see our brigade will come to that village, and in the medical facility at that village, we will be able to provide our help. Apart from that, we are able to develop other area. We'll be talking about medical points that will be concentrated in the areas where we have lots of people coming that are fleeing the war, where the official system cannot cope, is overpowered. Are these professional doctors? They are professional doctors and professional helpers, and they are part as of the first aid government-run system. They have transportation, they have diagnosis, instruments, and they have a set of medicines to provide first aid. These first aid brigades can visit a patient, but it must be brought in line and authorized by the local medical authorities. They can help with resettling patients, not to go from building to building, but rather you come to a place and then you render the aid under the guidance of the local medical authorities. But this is a substantial medical work. We have proven how efficient we are in Lugansk and Donetsk regions, in Kherson region, and especially under the COVID, we have been tested very seriously. It is also important to see numbers. We are talking about the number of volunteers, the aid that has been rendered. But behind that, we have specific people, perhaps the management of the Ukrainian Red Cross. Perhaps there are people that you would single out among your volunteers, people that we call the heroes of our time. Who has struck you as most prominent? I think all volunteers have been doing their amazing work in their own way. When we heard in the city of Kiev the sounds of the air attack, we rushed to our center and we started to work. It goes for the territory of Ukraine in general, where volunteers began their work and are beginning their work. Personally, I was struck by a person that I will be thankful to for the rest of my life, because she helped my family to flee the city of Sumy. That is the head of our oblast administration. This is my personal, Miss Presnina, that's my personal example. Dear colleagues, I would like to mention that at the head of the Ukrainian Red Cross, I am thankful to everybody working. But of course, because I am a surgeon with lots of experience, I appreciate the brigade headed by Mr. Logginov, because what I see there is a life throbbing. But you know, every area that we deal with is a very important and useful piece of work. As a general director and my team, we are in contact with every single head of the oblast administrations. We haven't seen any kind of uh, people being confused or embarrassed. No embarrassment, no confusion. We can safely say today that at our sittings every day at the headquarters of the Red Cross, of course, we are holding them online, where we discuss all the urgent issues. Sometimes we hold meetings of the president with the heads of the oblast administrations to prioritize our needs and define our needs. Let me also tell you that our vice president, Mr. Rozenko, as a public figure, more often than not, is present at different media events. We want to share information as wide as we can. Today, we have focused on the most general things. We have not gone into details, but we have done a lot and we are going to do a lot. There is another question to conclude. The run-of-the-mill persons, general public, should understand this dualism, this distinction between the International Red Cross and the Ukrainian Red Cross organization. To best of my knowledge, this is an international practice. You mentioned more than 103 national societies. Why is it that you cannot get united? Why do you need National Red Cross and International Red Cross? You're not internationally mandated. How do you negotiate things like corridors and evacuations, these urgent issues? Now, first of all, I would like to follow up on what our president has mentioned. Ukrainian Red Cross Society is open to all your questions. Don't invent anything. You have to turn to us. We are available 24/7. Apart from helping people, we stand ready to answer your questions. Just give us a call. We will tell you everything you need to know. In fact, there is no duality. Every organization, every body, every structure performs their functions. Indeed, we are all participants of the Red Cross movement, but the Ukrainian Red Cross Association works within Ukraine and, of course, works with the Ukrainian authorities, and we perform our functions within Ukraine, helping Ukrainians and Ukrainian citizens 24 hours a day. That is to say, we are Ukrainian, non-governmental, or charitable organization. And again, we are not representatives, not a mission, not an office of the International Red Cross, because International Red Cross is a separate organization with their mandates and their powers and their functions. They're independent beyond any political affiliation, shall I say, apolitical agency. They are working with all the structures, with all the agencies. They are politically neutral. They position themselves as a separate unit that is called to work with all the parties, warring parties, conflicting parties, and so on. Indeed, we cooperate, they help us. Within our powers, we do our best to help them, but they have their mission in Ukraine, the mission of the International Red Cross organization with their powers and their missions. Of course, many people are asking, how come they will open something in the city of Rostov in Russia? Our question is not where that unit will be set up. Our question is, what is the function of that place? The Red Cross enjoys exclusive rights, something we don't enjoy. For example, access to the prisoners of war. If through such missions we have access to the Ukrainian POWs that are now in the territory of other countries, and if the International Red Cross will provide for the treatment, a decent treatment, according to the international humanitarian law, this is a decent mission by the International Red Cross. If we are talking identifying the dead, something the Ukrainian government is into, or informing the other party, the opposite party, on the dead or their dead, and how to get those bodies transported to their territories. This is a worthy function of the International Red Cross. There are many questions about illegal deportation of the Ukrainians into the territory of the aggressor. This is a fact. This is not done by the International Red Cross. It is not done by the International Red Cross system in general. This is what the Russian Federation is doing. But currently, as of now, according to our assessments, more than 60,000 Ukrainians have been taken against their will towards the Russian territory, but to protect the human rights of these people, and mainly providing for the opportunity of these people coming back to the Ukrainian territory can be a mission of the International Red Cross Committee. And they are publicly stating that they are ready to facilitate the return of the Ukrainian citizens. This is a positive side of what the Red Cross Committee can do, and we appreciate that work. So first, I think the direct contact person with the Red Cross Committee is the Ukrainian government. Peter Mauer, before going to Russia, visited Ukraine. He visited Ukrainian Prime Minister, Mr. Vereshchuk, the Minister of Defense. He met us too as a partner organization. So I believe that the effective work and the efficiency of the Red Cross movement in general lies in the dialogue, in the constant work where we will be empowered to evacuate people, and I believe such an opportunity will be available when Russia lives up to its commitments, when we have people evacuated from Mariupol and other hotspots, including other missions and mandates enjoyed by the International Committee of the Red Cross. Here in Ukraine, our Red Cross Society will focus on the work of helping Ukrainians to survive, and in this stress
допомагати тим людям, які сьогодні потребують нашої допомоги безпосередньо і в зоні бойових дій, і в інших територіях, які теж сьогодні страждають від цієї, ну, скажімо так, війни, яка сьогодні в нас відбувається в Україні. Ну от,
я хотів би додати, що
I would also like to add that the mission of the International Red Cross has been working in Ukraine since 2015. It has been here and it's working, and I mentioned that. Today, the mission of the Red Cross to Ukraine has expanded their staff. Let me remind you, this is a middleman activities between the warring countries. It's an intermediary brokering function because they have to keep relations with both sides. Very often the decisions taken by the warring parties are sometimes classified. That is why International Red Cross Committee has a direct contacts and ways to cooperate with the government, with the authorities. And we here are helpers to the Ukrainian authorities to overcome humanitarian crisis. So in the public domain, and of course, I have a lot of questions to the International Red Cross. They don't call the war a war, they call it a conflict of international nature. Can you contact them? Can you change their view? Is it possible that the World Red Cross Committee will be acting in a way that is advantageous to Ukraine? You see, I have reiterated that thing again. Ukrainian Red Cross organization is different. Here we have a discussion between effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness means that you take the podium and you use your bullhorn in calling people aggressors, victims, enemies, and so on. But from the point of view of the efficiency, the results of helping people, this will bring not of the results. This will be fruitless. I think once we look at the history of the Red Cross Committee, their logic is different. Their philosophy is to speak less, but to be efficient. Of course, you can call an enemy an enemy, but after that, we are all aware that to get people evacuated from the hot stop will be less or lesser, or the possibility will be zilch, nothing, to get those people evacuated through the Red Cross. It's their history, it's their activities for more than a century. Our challenge is to get into the nature of this conflict. Our mission is to cooperate with the Red Cross Committee, not in terms of holding press opportunities, but rather to be effective, quietly evacuate people, providing them with the humanitarian aid, psychological, mental, medical help, and work, and get access to our prisoners of war. This is the mission of the Red Cross Committee, and the government is called and must and find such an efficient way of dialogue. But effectiveness, the hype is something we'll be talking about later. I would like to talk to the journalists listening to us. We have an interview given by Gerardo. He is the representative of the Red Cross Committee here in Kiev. He reiterates once again and again, they are intermediaries. They have to keep contacts with the both warring parties at the United Nations organization, at the International Red Cross Committee. It is a rule to talk about military conflict. This is their language. But let us look at the other side of the coin. Today, the Russian Federation is ignoring the international court, ignoring the resolutions by the UN, ignore the work of the OSCE. Everything is ignored by the Russian Federation. That is why, to get an agreement, to come to terms with that, the opposite party, is very difficult. including, as far as I can say, the International Red Cross. I did not personally participate in the negotiations, but I can feel that such a work is very difficult. Mr. Logginov and his rapid response team went to the places where the humanitarian corridors were about to be organized, risking their lives. They were doing what they were called to do, but they were accompanied by the local authority representatives. Taras, if you think it's proper, you might mention that. Indeed, we went beyond the front line, and there were some means to get people evacuated. Thank you. We have heard what you say. There has been a lot of information shared. We are aware of the contribution, great contribution of the Red Cross Society of Ukraine to the victory. And I have only to thank you, the panelists of today's event. As a Ukrainian citizen, I completely see eye to eye with you that we are doing a lot for the sake of the victory. But the Ukrainian Red Cross Society is doing a lot to overcome the humanitarian aid as the result of the war. This is the way to follow. With that, we thank you and goodbye.